You know, it's a most peculiar thing to wake up, because the very first sensation of awakening is not one of gaining anything, it's of losing. And not just losing in the usual sense of misplacing your keys or your job or your plans for the weekend, but of losing something far more intimate, the sense that you ever had anything to begin with. When you begin to stir from the dream, you notice that the possessions you spent your life guarding, your opinions, your ambitions, your very identity, are not really possessions at all. They're more like clouds in a windy sky. For a moment they seem solid, definite, yours, and then whoosh, they drift on, changing shape, changing color, refusing to stay put, no matter how tightly you try to hold them. Most of us have been trained since childhood to believe that life is a sort of shopping trip, that the goal is to acquire things, knowledge, experiences, enlightenment. We are told, work hard, be good, and someday you'll get your reward. And of course, being clever monkeys, we take that to mean there's a thing to get, a spiritual trophy waiting at the end of the line. But when you wake up, you discover there is no line, and there never was a trophy, only the walking, the breathing, the seeing of what has always been here. It's rather like a fog lifting. The landscape was always there, but you mistook the mist for substance. You spent your life studying the fog, analyzing its density, comparing shades of gray, even building cathedrals in its honor, and suddenly the sun burns through, and you laugh because you realize you were never lost, only looking at vapor. And this laughter can be unsettling, you see, because we are terribly fond of our fogs. They give us something to do, something to worry about, something to call mine. To lose them feels like death. But death of what? Not of life, not of consciousness, not of reality, but of the illusion that you were ever apart from it. So this is the strange business of awakening. It begins with a kind of holy theft. Something steals away your confidence in possession. You find that you cannot hold on to ideas, cannot hold on to the past, cannot even hold on to yourself. And instead of despair, you feel light because it was the holding that made you heavy. You see, all along you've been clutching at smoke, mistaking motion for meaning, ownership for being. And when that movement stops, when you finally sit still enough to see, there's a delicious astonishment. My God, I never had it at all, and yet here it is. That's the paradox. You lose everything you thought you owned, only to discover that what remains cannot be owned, cannot be lost, cannot even be named. It's not a thing, it's the dance itself, the music that plays, whether or not you're listening. And from that moment, life ceases to be a contest of accumulation and becomes instead a celebration of participation. You're no longer the miser guarding treasure, you're the wave returning to the sea, realizing it was never separate to begin with. That's where awakening truly begins. In the laughter that rises, when you see that all your losses were imaginary. You can only lose what you never really had. You see, once you begin to wake up, the first thing that slips through your fingers, quite against your will, is certainty. And oh, how we adore being certain. We like to think of ourselves as sailors with firm hands on the wheel, charts neatly drawn, the compass pointing true north. But awakening shows you that the compass was spinning all along, and the sea was never meant to be tamed. Certainty, you realize, is a kind of security blanket for the mind, a way of pretending that the unknown has been domesticated. It gives us comfort, yes, but it also gives us blindness. We say, I know what's right. I know what's true. And the moment we say that, we stop looking. We close the door on the mystery that was trying so hard to speak through us. It's rather like holding a butterfly too tightly. You think you're keeping it safe, but in your effort to preserve its beauty, you crush it. So too with truth. The moment you try to keep it, to pin it down, to own it, it dies. The living truth is always moving, always flowing, and the price of staying with it is the willingness to let go of knowing. So, When the spiritually awake begin to lose certainty, it's not that they've become confused or careless. It's that they've seen through the illusion that life is a puzzle to be solved, rather than a mystery to be lived. They no longer mistake the map for the territory, nor the description for the described. For what is a map but a piece of paper pretending to be a world? And yet, look at how desperately we cling to our maps, our moral maps, our political maps, our religious maps, all claiming to show the way. But awakening whispers, there is no way. You are already there. And at that moment, the map catches fire, and what's left is the vastness of the territory itself, boundless, frightening, exquisite. You begin to live not by rules, but by rhythm. You find that wisdom is not a collection of facts, but a sensitivity to flow. The awakened mind says, I don't know what's coming next, but I trust that whatever it is, it's me. This is not ignorance, it's innocence. A childlike openness that sees wonder in everything because it refuses to classify anything as final. You see, the universe is playful. It hides itself in uncertainty so that you might go on discovering it forever. And the tragedy of human seriousness is that we try to stop the game. We want a guarantee, a formula, a promise that we'll be safe. But safety is the opposite of life. The tree that never bends breaks in the storm. The water that never flows becomes stagnant. When certainty dissolves, something marvelous happens. Curiosity returns. The world becomes alive again, shimmering, unpredictable, unspeakably fresh. You stop trying to explain thunder and start listening to it. You stop trying to define love and start feeling it. You stop trying to master life and start dancing with it. So don't be afraid when certainty begins to crumble. It isn't the end of knowledge, it's the beginning of wisdom. It's the moment you trade the dusty museum of conclusions for the living forest of wonder. And if you can stand there, naked, in the wind of the unknown, without clutching for answers, you'll find that the very ground beneath you is alive, supporting you effortlessly. You'll laugh, perhaps even cry, realizing that the comfort you've lost was only a cage and that freedom, though uncertain, was all you ever wanted. Now, once you've lost your precious certainty, the next thing that quietly slips away, often without your permission, is the feeling that you are in control. And that, my friends, is a dreadful blow to the ego. Because the ego has spent a lifetime pretending to be the general manager of the universe. We've all been trained to believe that life is something we must manage, as though existence were a corporation and we were the overworked executives trying to keep it profitable. We try to control our future, our image, our lovers, our children, even our own thoughts, as if by sheer willpower we could make the tides obey and the sun rise on cue. But when awakening begins, you start to see the cosmic comedy of it all. You notice that while you've been straining, sweating, planning, and worrying, your heart has been beating itself quite nicely. Your lungs have been drawing air in and out without consulting your to-do list. The stars are spinning, the rain is falling, the grass is growing, and not once have they asked for your opinion. You begin to suspect that control was never more than a story you told yourself to feel safe. It's like a child sitting in the back seat of a car, pretending to steer while the grown-up drives. And when you realize this, at first it's terrifying, because the idea that you are not in charge sounds like chaos. But then, like everything else in awakening, the terror turns to laughter. You laugh because you see that you were never steering, and yet somehow the journey has been going beautifully all along. You see, the need for control is born from mistrust. We don't trust life to be kind, so we try to manage it. We don't trust others to love us freely, so we manipulate. We don't trust ourselves to be enough, so we build elaborate masks. But all this control, all this tightening, only creates tension, and tension if you hold it long enough, becomes suffering. The awakened person discovers that the opposite of control is not chaos, but flow. Like a dancer who moves with the music instead of fighting it, they learn the art of effortless participation. The Taoists call it Wu Wei, not inaction, but action in harmony with the current. The bird doesn't fly by pushing the air, it rides it. The river doesn't rush to the sea, it becomes the sea. And so, the game of control begins to dissolve. You stop trying to make things happen and start allowing them to happen through you. You stop forcing the melody and begin to hear the silence between the notes. You find yourself guided not by plans, but by intuition, a kind of quiet intelligence that seems to whisper from the center of your being, "Trust me, I've been doing this forever." Of course, the ego resists. It doesn't want to dissolve its position as CEO of Reality Incorporated. It complains, "But if I don't control things, they'll fall apart." And life, ever mischievous, smiles and says, "Try it." So you loosen your grip just a little, and the world doesn't end. In fact, it gets lighter, gentler, more alive. You realize that the tighter you held, the less you felt, and the more you release, the more you are. So, the loss of control is not a loss at all. It's the rediscovery of rhythm, of the fact that you were never separate from the great dance. You don't have to conduct the symphony. You are the music. The river's been carrying you the whole time, and it never once needed your permission. And when you finally stop fighting the current, something miraculous happens. The effort disappears, but the intelligence remains. You act, but without strain. You move, but without motive. You live, but without fear. For you see, when you give up trying to control life, you discover that life has been perfectly in control all along. You know, one of the most astonishing moments in awakening is when you begin to see, truly see, that the person you've been calling me all these years is something of a magnificent fiction, a well-written character in a long-running play. You've been rehearsing your lines since childhood. This is who I am. This is what I believe. This is how I differ from everyone else. And yet, when the curtain of awareness rises, you find that the actor has mistaken himself for the role. The mask has grown to fit the face so perfectly that you can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. And then, suddenly, with no great explosion, the illusion cracks, and you realize that what you thought was the solid, enduring self is more like a mirage shimmering on the desert horizon. This discovery can be disorienting, even frightening. Because you see, the me you've been protecting, the one with the story, the reputation, the opinions, was never truly there to begin with. It was a bundle of memories, habits, and words held together by belief. And when belief dissolves, the bundle falls apart like mist in sunlight. But this is not annihilation, it's revelation. You don't vanish, you expand. You stop being a noun and become a verb. You discover that I was never a fixed point at all, but a flowing process, breathing, changing, laughing, grieving, like a flame that exists only by burning. Think of it this way. When you look into a mirror, you see a reflection. It moves when you move, smiles when you smile. But have you ever tried to grab it? You can't, because there's nothing there to grab. It's an image, dependent on light and position. So too with the self. It's not an object you possess, but an ongoing relationship, a dance between consciousness and the world it mirrors. Now, the tragedy is that we spend most of our lives trying to improve this reflection. We polish it, paint it, parade it about, all the while terrified that someone might notice it's only a reflection. Awakening pulls the mirror from the wall. It reveals that you are not the reflection, you are the light by which it appears. And once you've seen that, you can never take the mask quite as seriously again. Oh, you still play your part, you still sign your name, pay your taxes, tell your jokes, but somewhere beneath the performance, there's a quiet laughter. You know it's a role, and you enjoy it as such. This is why enlightened people often seem to carry a strange lightness, a kind of cosmic humor. They've discovered that the game of being someone was never meant to be won, only played beautifully. They can be fully human without being trapped in humanity. When you realize that the me is just a mask, you stop defending it so fiercely. An insult no longer wounds because it's aimed at a character you're merely portraying. A compliment no longer inflates because it praises a costume you happen to be wearing. You begin to move through life like a skilled actor who loves the play but knows he's not the part. And what freedom that brings! To live without constantly protecting the fragile fiction of identity. To speak without the need to impress. To love without the fear of losing face. To die without the terror of extinction. For when the mask falls away, what remains is not nothing, it is everything. You find that underneath the costume of the individual, there is a vastness, silent, radiant, unchanging, from which all characters arise and to which they return. You are not the wave fighting the sea. You are the sea pretending to be a wave for a little while. And once you've seen that, you can never quite forget the sound of the ocean in your own heartbeat. You see, once the mask begins to slip, another illusion comes tumbling down with it, the need for the crowd's applause. For most of our lives, we've been playing to an audience we can't even see, performing to earn their nods and smiles. We measure our worth by echoes, the number of people who agree with us, the applause that greets our opinions, the number of hands that pat our back and tell us we're doing all right. But when you start to wake up, you find something very curious. The applause begins to sound hollow. You begin to see that most of what passes for friendship or admiration is really a kind of mutual contract. I'll believe in your story if you'll believe in mine. I'll tell you you're wonderful if you'll do the same for me. And it works, until someone stops pretending. You begin to notice that much of what people call connection is built upon shared pretense. We agree to suffer the same illusions together. We agree that Monday mornings are dreadful, that success means climbing ladders, that love means possession, and that happiness is just one purchase away. But when you see through that, you can no longer keep a straight face in the game. And this can be lonely at first, because the play goes on, and you, having seen the stage lights and the ropes behind the curtain, can't unsee them. You can't laugh at the same jokes or tremble at the same fears, because you know they're part of the performance, and your friends, bless them, will look at you as if you've gone slightly mad. You haven't. You've simply stopped pretending that the masks are real. Now, the loss of the crowd's approval feels painful only if you still believe you need it. When you wake up, you realize that approval and disapproval are just two sides of the same coin, a currency invented by people afraid to stand alone. You see, that validation from others is like chasing your reflection in the water. The harder you reach for it, the more it ripples away. But here's the marvel. When you no longer need approval, something remarkable happens. Your love becomes authentic. You stop relating to people as roles and begin relating to them as meeting being. You can sit with someone in silence and feel more connected than in 1,000 words of small talk. You can disagree without hostility, love without ownership, and walk away without resentment. The socially awake person becomes, as it were, unreliable for the old games. You won't gossip properly, won't join in the collective outrage, won't pretend to be outraged when you're not. You won't laugh at jokes you don't find funny. You simply stand there, calmly, kindly, present, and that presence unsettles people, because your peace reveals their noise. And so you drift away from the crowd, not out of pride, but out of resonance. You find fewer people with whom you can speak without translation. Your circle may shrink, but your heart expands. You lose the comfort of agreement, but you gain the joy of authenticity. The irony is that when you stop trying to be liked, people start feeling safer around you, because they can sense you're not manipulating them. You're not auditioning for approval. You're just there, unarmed, unmasked, unashamed, and in your silence, they catch a glimpse of their own freedom. So you see, losing the crowd's approval isn't exile, it's liberation. The crowd never loved you anyway. It loved its idea of you. And that idea was always too small. When that phantom dies, what remains is the simple companionship of truth, the quiet joy of being at ease with yourself. Whether the world cheers or jeers, in the end, you don't reject the crowd, you outgrow it. You no longer need to be part of the audience because you've discovered that the play is being performed inside you. And when you know that, applause becomes unnecessary because the music of being is already playing, endlessly, whether anyone is listening or not. Now, once you've lost the crowd's applause, something even subtler begins to fade the illusion of progress. That dear old notion that life is a sort of mountain to be climbed, that each day you must take one more step toward the summit of perfection, success, enlightenment, or whatever bright trophy the mind happens to be chasing this week. We are taught from the cradle that existence is a ladder. You start at the bottom, and if you're clever, disciplined, and terribly serious, you might just make it to the top before the whole thing collapses. And yet, nobody ever quite stops to ask, top of what? We chase the next promotion, the next possession, the next spiritual experience. But when we arrive, if we ever do, the summit turns out to be another rung, cleverly disguised. It's rather like running on a treadmill that promises heaven at the next mile. The faster you go, the more it insists you're nearly there. And so you keep running, red-faced and breathless, never realizing that the finish line was an idea, and ideas have no distance. When awakening dawns, you begin to laugh at this divine absurdity. You see that the universe is not a staircase but a circle, more like a dance floor than a corporate hierarchy. You are not going anywhere. You are already there. The point was never to reach the end of the dance, but to move with the music while it's playing. You see, the ego is obsessed with progress because it survives on becoming. It cannot bear simply being. So it creates endless projects of self-improvement, physical, emotional, spiritual. It says, when I become enlightened, I'll finally be at peace. But the joke is that peace only arrives when the becoming stops. The moment you let yourself be, you find that what you were seeking has been here all along. Now, some people misunderstand this and think it means doing nothing, but it's quite the opposite. When the illusion of progress dissolves, you don't become lazy, you become alive. You act without striving. You work, but not for reward. You learn, but not to become superior. You live, not as a means to an end, but as an end in itself. The flower does not bloom to impress the garden. It opens because it cannot do otherwise. The bird does not sing to win applause. It sings because singing is its nature. And when you awaken, you realize you are the same. You are not here to achieve life. You are life. This is why enlightened people often appear to do less while accomplishing more. Their actions flow from stillness. They do not run after time. They move in rhythm with it. Theirs is not progress, but participation, not achievement, but alignment. And when you live like that, every moment becomes complete. There is nothing missing, nothing to reach. You begin to see that all this talk of becoming better was like polishing the surface of a mirror, already shining. The very effort to improve yourself was the cloud covering what was always pure. So, awakening gently takes from you the fantasy of progress, not to make you apathetic, but to free you from the anxiety of arrival. For how can you arrive where you already are? How can you catch what you already hold? The great relief of awakening is not that you have gained something new, but that you've stopped pretending there was ever something lacking. You no longer need to chase enlightenment because the chaser has vanished, and only light remains. And from that stillness, Life unfolds not as a race, but as a rhythm. You find yourself laughing, dancing, working, resting, all with the quiet joy of one who knows there is no finish line, and therefore no failure. The game is not to win, but to play beautifully. For you see, once you've seen through the illusion of progress, every step, every breath, every heartbeat becomes the destination itself. The pilgrim and the path are one and the same. And the journey, far from ending, is revealed as eternity already in motion. You know, there's a kind of suffering that people secretly enjoy. We might not admit it, but we cling to our tragedies the way a child clutches a tattered teddy bear. It's worn, it's ugly, it smells of tears, but it's ours. It gives us a story. It says, this is what happened to me, and that's why I am the way I am. And so, for years, perhaps lifetimes, we nurse our wounds, polishing them like family heirlooms. We wear them on our chests as badges of identity. I was betrayed. I was overlooked. I was misunderstood. There's a strange comfort in it, the comfort of being right about how wronged we've been. But when awakening begins, this comfort starts to crumble. You begin to see that your suffering is not just an unfortunate event, it's a performance, a story you keep retelling to maintain a sense of self. For who would you be if you weren't the victim? If you weren't the one who was hurt, the one who was right, the one who deserves sympathy? The ego trembles at the thought, because without the story, it doesn't know how to exist. The awakening person sees through this, not with cruelty, but with deep tenderness. You realize that holding on to your suffering is like drinking poison and hoping someone else will die. It doesn't work. The pain remains not because life keeps wounding you, but because you keep rehearsing the wound. You've mistaken the echo for the event, the memory for the moment, and here comes the great revelation. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain belongs to the body, it's a signal, a sensation, a flash of lightning that comes and goes, but suffering belongs to the mind. It's the thunder that rolls on long after the storm has passed. When you wake up, you stop feeding the thunder. You let the lightning strike, illuminate, and fade. You begin to see pain for what it is, clean, immediate, real, and suffering for what it was, a habit. Now, to the unawakened, this can look cold. They'll say, but you don't care. And you'll smile, because it's quite the opposite. You care more deeply than ever before, but you don't mistake caring for clinging. You feel pain fully, let it pass through, and find nothing left to hold on to, no bitterness, no score to settle, no one left to blame. This is true forgiveness, not the moral performance of saying, I absolve you, but the simple realization that there was never anything to absolve. The story of blame dissolves like a dream when you wake up. The villain, the victim, the drama, all seen as parts of the same cosmic dance, the same dream of separateness. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You begin to understand that what you call your suffering was actually life's way of shaking you awake. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every disappointment, they were not punishments, but invitations. Invitations to drop the story, to stop identifying with the wounded character, and to discover the boundless awareness watching the play. Then, the sweet suffering of victimhood turns bittersweet, and finally, it disappears altogether. You lose the pleasure of self-pity, but you gain something infinitely greater, freedom, the kind of freedom that doesn't need to be right or wronged, doesn't need to win or lose. You no longer say, this happened to me. You say, this happened, and here I am, still alive, still open, still part of the great unfolding. You stop being the victim of your story and become the witness of it. And the witness, my friends, was never hurt at all. So, you see, Losing the sweetness of suffering is not a loss, it's a homecoming. It's the moment you realize that you no longer need pain to know you exist, no longer need an enemy to feel righteous, no longer need a wound to justify your heart. You let it all go, and in that letting go, the world becomes new. Because you can't taste the beauty of life while chewing on its ashes. Now, my friends, there comes a moment in every genuine awakening when you find that something deeper, perhaps the deepest thing of all, has quietly dissolved, and that is the fear of death. For most people, death is the great unmentionable. We speak of it in hushed tones, as if saying the word too loudly might tempt fate. We dress it up in euphemisms: passed away, gone to a better place, at peace. But behind those gentle phrases hides a trembling terror, the conviction that death is the enemy, that it waits at the end of the road, cold and final, ready to snuff us out like a candle. Yet when awakening begins, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see that death is not at the end of the road, it is the road. It runs through everything. Every breath you take, every heartbeat, every falling leaf and fading sunset, all are small rehearsals for the great rhythm of coming and going. Life and death are not two things. They are the same movement seen from different ends of the wave. You see, the universe doesn't fear death because it never dies. It simply changes its mask. The cloud becomes rain, the rain becomes river, the river becomes sea, and the sea rises once more as cloud. Where, in that endless cycle, did anything truly vanish? The problem, you see, is that we identify ourselves with the form, with the temporary costume. We think, I am this body, these memories, this name, this face. And naturally, when the form begins to crumble, we panic. But awakening reveals the quiet truth. You are not the costume. You are the consciousness wearing it. And consciousness cannot die. It may change clothes, but it cannot vanish. Imagine watching a fire burn. You might say, look, the flame is dying. But if you look more closely, you realize it's not dying, it's transforming. The fire becomes light and heat and smoke, spreading itself through the air. Its form disappears, but its essence remains in every molecule it has touched. So too with us. The body is the wick, but the light was never confined to it. And when this truth dawns, the fear of death melts like frost under the morning sun. You stop clinging to your days like a miser clutching coins. And you begin to spend them freely, lavishly, because you know there's no shortage of life. The supply is infinite, always expressing itself through new forms. To the unawakened mind, death looks like a full stop. To the awakened heart, it's merely a comma, a pause in the sentence of eternity. And so, you stop postponing life. You stop saying, someday I'll really live. You see that this breath, this moment, this laugh, this tear is life itself, shimmering between appearances and disappearances. When you no longer resist death, something miraculous occurs. You stop resisting life. Because they were never two separate battles. They were the same fear, seen from opposite sides. The fear of dying is really the fear of living completely, of surrendering so fully to the present that you no longer have any ground left to stand on. And that surrender, my friends, is freedom. To live without clinging, to love without demanding, to die without regret. That is the song of awakening. You may still mourn, still weep, still feel the ache of loss, for that is part of love. But beneath the tears, there's a vast calm, a sense that all is well, because it could never be otherwise. So when the fear of death dissolves, you find that life itself deepens. Every color grows brighter, every sound more vivid, every moment more sacred. Not because it will last forever, but precisely because it won't. Death doesn't rob life of meaning. It gives it flavor. It's the silence that makes the music possible. And when you finally understand this, you no longer dread the ending of the song. You simply listen completely, gratefully, until the last note fades into stillness. And in that stillness, you realize something astonishing. The listener and the music were never two. You have not conquered death. You have seen through it. You were never in danger. You were never born, and you will never die. You are the eternal rhythm playing at being temporary. The wave remembering it is the sea. You know, once you've made peace with death, you find something quite extraordinary happens. The future disappears. Poof, vanishes like smoke. Not because it's been stolen from you, but because you finally see that it was never there in the first place. We live, you see, as though the future were this great looming kingdom, a place we're all marching toward with grim determination. Everything we do seems to be in service of it. We save, we plan, we postpone joy, we delay love, all for the sake of this magical tomorrow that never arrives. And yet, if you stop for just a moment and look around, you'll notice that you've never actually been in the future. Not once. Every experience you've ever had, every thought, every heartbeat, every kiss, every grief has occurred now. The future, like the horizon, always recedes as you approach it. It's the carrot dangling in front of the donkey. And the donkey, bless its heart, never suspects that the carrot is attached to its own neck. Awakening is when the donkey finally stops running. Now, this doesn't mean you stop planning or caring. It means you stop living for a future that exists only as imagination. You still may write your calendar and make your breakfast for tomorrow, but you do it in the only time that ever truly exists, this one. The plan becomes play. The anticipation becomes participation. You see, we've been hypnotized into believing that fulfillment lies ahead. Once I get there, I'll be happy. Once I achieve that, I'll rest. But the moment you arrive, there has already moved. It's the most exquisite mirage. And so we keep running, chasing shadows, mistaking movement for meaning. But when the future dissolves, really dissolves, you discover something utterly liberating. There is no need to rush, because there's nowhere to go. This is it. Not a rehearsal, not a prelude, not a waiting room for some grand event. This is the event. The moment you stop hurrying, life starts happening. And what a relief that is. You realize that anxiety is nothing more than arguing with time, wanting the next moment to arrive before this one has finished. But the next moment never comes. There is only this one, again and again, dressed in new clothes. It's rather like a film projector. The reel contains thousands of frames, but the light shines through only one at a time. We imagine we're watching motion, a story unfolding, but what we're really seeing is a single frame illuminated now, now, now. The movie is not happening in time. Time is happening in the movie. When you wake up to this, the obsession with progress, with achievement, with getting somewhere, begins to melt away. You find that the only real richness is presence being so deeply here that even the smallest details shimmer with eternity. The breeze on your skin, the flicker of sunlight through leaves, the sound of your own laughter, these are not stepping stones to anything else. They are the destination. And curiously, when you live like this, you become far more effective, far more creative, far more alive, because all your energy is no longer wasted on a phantom tomorrow. It's concentrated in the living moment, and that is the only place anything ever gets done. So when the future disappears, life doesn't shrink, it expands. Time ceases to be a corridor you're trapped in and becomes a vast open field with no boundaries at all. You stop counting the hours and start listening to them, and you find they're all singing the same note. Now, the awakened person doesn't say, I'm preparing for my future. They say, I am my future, unfolding right here. For them, tomorrow is simply today, wearing a new face. And in that realization, the heavy machinery of time, the clocks, the calendars, the anxious ticking of the mind falls silent. And in that silence, you discover eternity not as an endless stretch of time, but as the timelessness of this very moment. The great secret, of course, is that eternity was never waiting for you at the end of time. It's been quietly shining through every instant of your life. You were simply too busy planning to notice. Now here's a particularly delicate illusion, the last one most seekers are willing to surrender. You've lost your certainty, your control, your mask, your need for approval, even your precious future. But deep down, one final story remains, that you are on a path, that there is still something to reach, a mountaintop to ascend, a goal to accomplish, even if that goal now wears spiritual clothing. You see, the ego is a trickster. When it realizes it can no longer play the game of worldly achievement, it quietly changes costumes and joins the temple. It trades its business suit for robes and beads. It no longer boasts, I'm richer or smarter, but whispers, I'm more conscious, more aware. It has merely reinvented itself, the same salesman, now peddling enlightenment instead of luxury. But awakening, when it deepens, reveals the most unsettling and liberating truth of all. There is no path. There never was. The destination you've been striving toward is precisely the place from which you began. The seeker and the sought are the same. The goal was never out there waiting for you. It was the awareness doing the seeking all along. Imagine a dog chasing its own tail. It runs in circles for years, perhaps lifetimes, convinced that just one more turn will catch it. And then suddenly, in a flash, it stops. The tail was never separate. The chase was the illusion. That moment of stillness is enlightenment. Now, that doesn't mean that teachers, practices, or disciplines are useless. Far from it. They are the rafts that carry us across the river. But once you reach the other shore, you don't strap the raft to your back and keep walking. You bow to it, you thank it, and you let it float away. When you awaken, you realize that even the teacher was a mask of the same awareness that looks out through your eyes. The Buddha teaching and the student listening were two sides of one infinite mind, playing hide and seek. The path was never leading you anywhere, it was merely giving you the pleasure of walking. And so, in that moment, the whole hierarchy collapses. There is no higher or lower, no beginner or master. The tree doesn't compare the height of its branches to the roots. Both belong to the same living organism. Likewise, all expressions of consciousness, the wise, the foolish, the awake, the asleep, are movements of the same divine dance. This is why genuine teachers, those who have truly seen, are full of laughter. They know that the idea of teaching enlightenment is a delightful paradox. It's like trying to sell water to the ocean. They're not imparting something you lack, they're reminding you of what you already are. But of course, the mind doesn't like that. It wants steps, techniques, stages, structure, something to cling to, something to master. And so long as it insists on being the doer, the path remains endless. The moment you relax the grip and stop trying to awaken, awakening is suddenly there, or rather, it's recognized as having always been there. The great joke, my friends, is that there was never anyone to awaken. There was only awakening itself, pretending to be asleep so it could enjoy the drama of waking up. And when this sinks in, not as an idea, but as a lived realization, the whole scaffolding of spiritual ambition falls away. The seeker disappears, and in that disappearance, the goal disappears too, because they were one and the same illusion. What remains is simplicity. Breathing, laughing, watching the wind move through the trees. You no longer ask, how do I get there? Because there is no there. You are the destination, eternally arriving at yourself. You're like a wave realizing it was never traveling across the sea. It was the sea moving in infinite shapes all along. So, when you lose the teacher, the path, and the goal, you don't lose guidance, you gain intimacy with existence itself. Every sound, every person, every moment becomes your teacher. Every step becomes the path. Every breath becomes the goal already fulfilled. And perhaps, if you're quiet enough, you can hear the universe chuckling softly, as if to say, welcome home. You never left. And so, after all these little deaths, the death of certainty, of control, of the self, of approval, of progress, of victimhood, of the fear of death, of the future, and finally, of the very path itself, something remarkable remains. Something that cannot be lost because it was never born. You discover that beneath every funeral, there was a birth taking place. Beneath every loss, a quiet freedom blooming. The universe, it seems, was never asking you to renounce anything real, only to stop clinging to illusions that kept you from seeing its face. What is left when everything false falls away? Nothing you can name, and yet everything. The morning light spilling across your floor, the breath that moves in and out without your command, the laughter that comes from nowhere and returns there again. The ordinary miracle of existence, needing no justification, no promise, no reward. You see, the gift of awakening isn't a higher state or some celestial achievement. It's the rediscovery of the obvious, the radiant simplicity of what's always been here. You realize that the divine you were seeking was not hidden behind the clouds, but shining through your own eyes, that the sacred is not elsewhere, but everywhere, in the creak of a chair, the taste of tea, the warmth of sunlight on skin. And you laugh. Oh, how you laugh, because the whole thing was a game of hide and seek. You were playing with yourself. You were the seeker and the sought, the question and the answer, the hiding and the finding, the play of forgetting and remembering, losing and returning. All your losses were only love in disguise, patiently stripping away everything that prevented you from seeing that you were never apart from it. The awakened one does not walk above the world, but right through it, chopping wood, carrying water, paying taxes, feeding the cat, but with eyes that see through the veil. They know that the cat, the wood, the water, the tax collector, and the self paying the bill are all the same vast consciousness, pretending to be many, for the sheer delight of surprise. You realize there was never anything to escape, never anything to attain. The game was not to reach enlightenment, but to see that everything was enlightened from the very beginning, even your confusion, even your mistakes, even your longing. The light was never absent. You were simply blinking. And in that recognition, there's peace. Not the peace of an ending, but the peace of recognition that nothing needs to end and nothing needs to begin. Life and death, joy and sorrow, gain and loss, they keep dancing, just as they always have. But you, the dancer, have vanished into the dance. You no longer ask, what comes next? Because the next has become now. You no longer cling to meaning, because meaning shines from everything. You no longer search for love, because love has turned out to be the one doing the searching. And when someone asks you what awakening feels like, you might simply smile and say, it feels like being very, very ordinary only now. Even the ordinary feels divine. Because the gift beneath all these funerals is not an afterlife or an escape from the world, but the end of separation itself, the rediscovery that there was never anything to lose, never anyone to lose it, and never anywhere to go but here. And once you see that, really see it, every breath becomes a prayer without words. every heartbeat a reminder that eternity is already happening. You can walk through the world lightly now, knowing that wherever you step, the ground of being rises to meet you. The play goes on. The masks change. The waves rise and fall. The universe keeps pretending to forget and remember itself. But you who are not apart from it can finally rest, for you have discovered what cannot be found, achieved what cannot be earned, and remembered what was never forgotten. You are home, and you were never anywhere else.